Hey, Jen.
Hello.
So we're here today to talk about webinars and more importantly, how to do a better webinar than sort of the standard program that folks have been running for a long time and that is starting to feel pretty stale.
Archaic. Yeah.
Yes. It's interesting though, because it's still such a tried and true channel for B2B. And they are very complex on the marketing ops side, as I've learned since I've been at Sponge. But yeah, it feels like, especially since the pandemic, webinars are just not driving the same, certainly attendance rates. We've seen across our client base, attendance rates dropping from about like 50% of registrants actually showing up now to 25%. So I thought it was smart for us to get together and talk about like rethinking this format because it is pretty stale. And then what to do with the actual content that you generate from the video itself and making sure you can get legs out of it for all those folks who would, get the content asynchronously.
Mhm.
So I'm curious how, with our clients, in your 18 years of demand gen history, what do you look for when it comes to picking a topic?
So similar to kind of other blogs that we've wrote, I think looking and understanding like what have they spoken about before, what topics resonate really well, whether it's, in their blog, whether, other pieces that they've done through content syndication or just, their highest performing like lead gen assets. I think that's like a good place to start. And making sure that the topics also kind of stand a certain test of time, nothing that's truly within like one moment. I think also that kind of topical subject can be sliced and diced into many different like assets later on, essentially.
Yeah, that's
So
smart though
that's
to
where I
not
would
have
start.
any. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Um, and then I also think that any topics that kind of call for uh, a strong POV, I think most people know like not to talk about, a sales pitch or
Yeah.
something new in their product. Like no one cares, honestly. But I do think it's helpful when maybe if it's an industry trend or something that's happening, something that's moving towards something, it's nice to have a discussion, a casual discussion
Mhm.
around what the clients or what the company's like POV is on the matter. Because I think that's really like resonable.
Yeah, and unique. It's not something somebody could Google.
Okay. Yeah.
Especially, yeah, if you have subject matter experts with an opinion, why not leverage that? And I also think, to your point, like the format is so important. I
Format's important. Yeah.
Yeah, I really gravitate to a conversation that's multiple people, it's casual, there aren't slides, like it's
Yeah.
almost like we're creating a vlog or like a video podcast. Like it is
Yes.
so much less a presentation these days, especially.
I think you saying the term podcast, I think hits all of like it just says everything that needs to be said because I think why it feels so stale, at least for some organizations, is they think webinar, they think, your tried and true platform, your tried and true like moderator, your intro, your what about the company,
Yeah,
your like Q&A, like everything's so rigid. And like people see through that and it's not compelling and it's just not, doesn't feel like
right.
kind of authentic, doesn't feel very free flowing. Whereas like a podcast style, it's just a conversation. And that's what like people want to be included in a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too, podcasts obviously have exploded in popularity, but they're hard to gate. They're hard to
Yeah.
create demand from them. And so this is an interesting way to kind of meet the middle of where consumers of content want to be, but still feed the funnel and capture data.
Yeah.
One thing I love too is I love an A/B test, but not using the word webinar, I think is
Yeah.
like a real X factor with
I say the
this.
same thing. Yeah. Just like
If I
to
see
talk about this.
webinar in an email, it's like delete. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But a deep dive, an AMA, a panel, like
Q&A. Yeah. A
something.
Q&A. Yeah. Something.
Yes, we have seen, with one of our clients, we've been referring to things as deep dives, which also, yeah, takes the pressure off. Like, watch a deep dive, like you do you.
Yeah.
There's no need to show up and actually like participate live. Um, and the content, yeah, is evergreen from that. It doesn't feel like I missed the moment. There's like There's no pressure there. Another thing I've seen us have a lot of success with is focus more on like the chemistry of the panel. And not everybody has to be a subject matter expert. Like someone can simply be charming and effective at moving the conversation along.
Yeah.
That person could be a BDR or like a customer success rep, like somebody who's great with people and they can
Yeah.
moderate technically, but they're just smoothing things out and keeping things lively.
Yeah, they have opinions that they want to share, and their opinions might differ from the opinions of someone else in a different department, but I think that dynamic is actually really nice to capture in a recording, because you have that perspective, and you have, and obviously it reaches like a wider audience, essentially, depending on the topic you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I also, I mentioned at the top that webinars do remain complicated to plan on the back end. How you set these things up, are you sending customized invites to registrants so that you're able to track their attendance? It is really worth giving yourself a month to do it properly, to like brief your BDRs that this is what people are coming in and talking about, to do a dry run and get the awkwardness out. We actually have a checklist of like 30 steps we go through for every webinar. I'll link that in the description of this video. But yeah, food for thought that if you're going to the trouble as well, you want to give yourself the time to thoroughly distro and prepare internally to make sure you have a good one.
This brings me back to our times hosting webinars pretty much every single week, bumping out to that like month to, I think the quickest turnaround was like 3 weeks, but even then, yeah, you need that buffer to like get everyone in line. But it harkens back to that time where it was just those, templates. Here's the timeline. Here's, everything is sonified. Here's what we're going to say. And then like multiple meeting syncs to make sure that like everyone's on the same page. And I think you and I have mastered a very mechanic rhythm that it's all just,
it is a formula. Yes.
Yeah, all the T's are crossed.
One thing I found recently, especially as we like do more of the podcast style and things are more casual, we do still need a dry run.
Yeah.
So that it's not like deer in headlights when folks actually show up and, interviews can be weird. Yeah. So we're not necessarily like going through every question that will be asked and what you'll say, but just sort of like getting people comfy with being on camera and having the rapport and listening to each other, I have found is important still.
I find that super important, also like really interesting, because not all, some orgs and some teams can really play on the kind of like casual rhythm, but a lot, you'd be surprised at how, at least initially, uncomfortable they are in trying to get into that comfortable casual mode. So a prep dry run session is super, super helpful. It's a must.
I think too, like in most business presenters, this is new for them. So the model is also, they're just kind of personally uncomfortable. They're used to their slide deck.
Yeah.
And they've got to push through, actually listen to each other.
Exactly. And I find that the podcast style kind of recording or, webinar format that we do also has a less quicker drop off in terms of like the standard webinar where you're going through like the introduction and a little bit about the company. And like, we tend to just like, we do a tiny bit of that and then go directly into the meat. And I think that's really resonated.
Yeah. Speaking of interesting content though, we've pulled together so many different kinds of webinars and different like topics and formats beyond the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some of my favorites. One I've loved is like a professional services team doing a live like critique of, clients who have agreed to that work. I remember, I think it was for Unbounce years ago, they did that where they would pull up people's landing pages and do like go live. This is what we think. And if you want to submit it and get like free advice, that was really a compelling format. Or like two people arguing a controversial topic, not arguing, debating, and having that kind of like feisty rapport between them as well.
Yeah.
Touring customer projects. There's lots that we've run.
Yeah, I remember I did something for a client that was in the commerce space, and we did a like services hours, you know,
Mhm.
for all of the questions, the nitty-gritty details, and that became chopped up into like tutorial snippets and like product call outs and annotations and a guide to like how to set up, you know, your shop. So I think that was the catalyst for all of that repackaged content down the line, all of the great ideas that came forth from people that
Yeah.
attend.
That's one thing too. Like webinars remain, in my opinion, a really efficient way to produce content. It's such a
Yeah.
crucible. Like we will record at X day and time. You need to be ready. We can't keep pushing it down. We're not going to do 30 rounds of edits. We don't have the luxury like in this format. And so you can almost reverse engineer like, okay, we need this kind of content. Let's do a webinar on it. And then we can get a transcript, repackage, like
Into a
extract.
blog. Yeah.
Yes. And so I find a lot of people, especially like on the technical side, aren't comfortable writing long form. Like they're not copywriters and they're going to procrastinate. They do not want to produce this versus extracting the information from them in a
Yeah.
conversation. I can go write it because I'm comfortable doing that. And I don't need to wait 6 months while they punt.
Yeah.
Really nice.
We've been able, specifically since you always just use a transcriber to
Mhm.
flip it. And then we've really been able to like move really fast on
Yeah.
getting that into whatever format.
Yes,
With that.
absolutely. I use rev.com. They're my
Mhm.
favorite transcriber, and I pay for human transcripts. So I pay, sometimes it's $100 to get a transcript that's perfect, but a copywriter costs that in an hour. And so yes, that is, I am transcribing every week something
Yeah.
and saving dozens of hours of my time going through and removing and all the little like, nuances of language that we don't need. I really recommend that. That's a real shortcut for me. Awesome. Is there anything else, if you were giving someone advice about
Yes.
like, please do this and please don't do this? Like, does anything come to mind? A rose and a thorn, if you will.
Yeah. Obviously as a demand gen performance marketer, like, yeah, we did the webinar. We got people in, you know, those that registered, those that attended. Like, what are we doing with those people afterwards? Is there a subset of those that maybe didn't attend that we want to nurture? Is there the folks that registered, attended, maybe asked some questions? Like, we got to treat them a little bit differently. Like, what are we saying? What's the next secondary CTA? Are they farther enough in the funnel where we could maybe push them towards a more bottom of the content or middle of the content piece? But I think that's a big thing that gets kind of lost in translation. Like, how are we tracking these people? How do we want to, feed content to them later on? I think that's really important to hammer down because they're literally giving up 30, 45 minutes of their time to talk, to listen to what you have to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're certainly compelled on some level. Yeah. And then, yeah, I think for me, the big takeaway is to not just let it live as a webinar in a resources gallery. No one's going to consume it. Like chop it up, post it on YouTube, make a little trailer, like have a little fun with the content, and you'll never have to record that topic again. You can just generate
Refer it.
consistently, yes, over and over and over again, different slices of that content that you recorded. I find now I record far fewer webinars, like as a channel, but we've never run more. Like we're doing encores or we're doing, slices of things.
Yeah.
But we're not having to sink in the same amount of work to prepare that content and
Yeah.
waste subject matter expertise time.
They are a ton of work.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jen. If you're interested in Sponge, visit us at sponge.io. And thanks, everybody.